Hello and welcome to Shape the System, where we find and tell the stories that help people to rethink the way the world works. We interview people from all over the world who are helping to change our systems for the better. Shape the System is an independent podcast with support from KPMG High Growth Ventures, who help ambitious founders and their teams scale up for success. More about KPMG High Growth Ventures after the interview. We hope you enjoy this episode.
Hi everyone, welcome to Shape the System. I'm your host, Vincent Turner. Today we have Jay Fairs from the wellness agency Co. Great to have you here, Jay.
Hello there. Thank you very much for having me.
Awesome. Hey, just let's start. Let's just go straight in. Like, talk to us about the wellness agency and the space you guys play in, and you know the problems that you're a part of solving.
I think the mission side of it is we believe that big food, big pharma, Western medicine, for all the great things they've historically done, are now sort of off the rails, and that there's a moral imperative to push back on that. And thankfully, there's this big wellness wave, but a lot of our mission is how do you take it out of the hipster enclaves where they're aware of it and into mainstream concepts.
Got it. And you spoke before about there is things that do work. If let's just focus on big pharma for a second. What works in that model and where does it fall over?
You know, in 83, pre-deregulation of pharma in America, there were two medicines that people took for long-term, and I think one was blood pressure, and I forget what the other one was. They deregged it, and now 20% of America is on 5 or more meds long-term, 50% is on 2 or more, 70% is on 1. I call it the subscription model of pharma. So clearly, you know, you've got shaky leg syndrome and all these other invented things. So I'm not, although there are divisions of pharma that are doing valuable things still, you know, how there aren't 100,000 doctors in jail for the opiate crisis blows my mind. They take a Hippocratic oath. They all knew what they were doing for 10 years plus, every single one of them. And truth be told, if they were black and selling that stuff on a street corner, they'd all be jail in America for 35. It's true. So it's gotten pretty, you know, and then you go to I'm going ahead of myself, but if you go to sugar getting pumped into the food supply, Coke and Pepsi didn't exist in China a quarter century ago. 25 years ago, they went in there. Diabetes did not exist in China 25 years ago. 25 years later, there are 400 million pre-diabetics in China. So you're seeing these Western companies export the worst of our habits.
Right. And is part of this then that we've so far and kind of in the traditional kind of pharma, not specifically, but even Western medicine sense, have relied on treating problems rather than behaviors and attitudes that might prevent problems from existing in the first place? Is that part of the kind of the lack here?
If you go into functional medicine, it's like the whole idea behind functional medicine is that Western med treats with a pill or a procedure. They treat the symptom, not the underlying cause. And what functional, just in that one example, and I think that's similar. It's like pharma rarely is, you know, like you look at antibiotics that pharma is built around and how and over prescribed those have become by our doctors. And like, as you start to if you go study the gut biome and the gut as the second brain, and it's got as many nerve endings as the brain, and they constantly talk to each other all day long. And it's like, when you put your gut biome on antibiotics, let alone prolonged use or overuse, it's kind of no different than putting your brain on opiates.
On opioids, right?
And so there are these great companies like Seed Health with what Ara Katz is doing, where it's putting science like deep in their science and deep in their their research and doing things to sort of heal the gut biome.
Right. And let's come back a step on that, because you mentioned diabetes in the China example just then. My guess is, and tell me if I'm wrong, obviously, that there's probably 4 or 5 or half a dozen or, you know, even 10 kind of major causes, if you like, of the lack of health in our society generally, whether that's America or Western society or, you know, the world. What would be some of those big kind of problem areas, diabetes being one of those?
I'm going to flip it around on you, and I'm not trying to get ahead of myself on the sort of founder story, and you can pull me back, but it is that idea of 15 years ago, before I'd gotten into this space, but kind of began the journey. It was one of the foundational things that sort of began the journey. It was just, I was running 35 miles a week. I'd do a 10-mile run every week.
Right.
This doctor who was considered the best for men in LA puts me on cholesterol med. And I'm like, I feel like every time I do the 10-mile run, I'm going to pull a calf muscle. And I was like, I feel like I'm going to pull a calf muscle. And he's like, well, we'll monitor it. And sure enough, do the 10-mile run the next week. Sure enough, pull the calf muscle, go in to see him, ask him what I should do. And what I now know is I don't care. You asked about diabetes. I don't care if it's heart disease, Alzheimer's, diabetes, blood pressure. Like it's really like the core of, to me, wellness is like, are you stressed? And then the corollary of, are you meditating? Are you hydrated? Are you, corollary is kind of, are you drinking too much booze? Are you eating too much processed food? Be that Kentucky KFC or processed meats. Processed food. Are you eating too much sugar versus are you eating whole foods? Are you Michael Pollan's 3 simple rules of eat mostly plants? That type of thing. And it's really these very foundational, are you sleeping well? Are you hydrating enough? Like I now drink 64 ounces of water a day. There's really simple stuff. And it tends to, are you exercising each day? If you do those 10 things, those 9 or 10 things, heart disease, they all kind of fade into the background.
Right.
I really do believe there are these foundational things you can do that aren't that hard, that we all used to do a lot more of.
Right.
And a lot of this stuff slips away.
Right. And so in thinking about that, then when the wellness agency sort of thinks, hey, what can we do to shift the dial on health outcomes for people generally, if America or otherwise, you're tackling less about, problems and more about behaviors that would prevent the problems in the first place?
I think we come at it from several different aspects, and we want to find founders that are big. Like there's this book I love called Play Bigger, and it talks about category design, designing for it to be a category king, having a flywheel of products. Like, and yes, what you asked is one way that we look at it. I also think that when I look at wellness, I think about physical health and nutritional health, and then you can break that. Nutritional health could be: do you want to be paleo, keto? Are you eating whole foods, vegan, macro? Like whatever you. There's 100 subsects in each one of these things practically. So physical and nutritional health, and then I think about spiritual and emotional health, and I think there's all kinds of subsets there. And then we talk about sexual and relational health, and then the last category is sort of financial health. If you're stressed about money and you don't have good money practices, it's hard to keep these other things in balance typically.
Interesting.
Those are the 7 at a more theoretical level. Those are probably the 7 aspects of wellness that we kind of guide people. And whether it's founders we're working with or thought leaders in the space, they tend to be approaching some aspect of one of those 7 areas.
Yeah. Okay. Fascinating. And then, because that's interesting, because I think a lot of, and you said these, let's call it 10 things that you said before, are things that we, getting more sleep and drinking more water and these types of things, typically not things that people don't, it's not an access issue in a lot of cases. It might be an education issue. I think that'll be part of it. But in a lot of cases, it's a behavioral issue, right? And so a lot of what these founders or companies are having to do, I'm guessing, are having to change people's behaviors, and, they reach for, the unprocessed food rather than the processed food. Is sort of a simple example. Is that the core of what a lot of these companies are doing or know how to do?
Case by case. I mean, I'm a redneck from Tennessee, a small town in Tennessee originally, and was back seeing a great aunt years ago, and I was driving through this. She lived in a town after traveling the world in World War II. She lived in this small town of 9,000 people, 100 miles from any city. And I remember stopping to get gas, and there was like 10, 11, 12-year-old kid. It's 10 in the morning. He's buying a 64-ounce Coke that had one of those huge cups with a little thing at the bottom to where it fits in. And the mom didn't know to tell him that, and he was already 120 to 140 pounds. I mean, you're laughing, but there's a major diabetes epidemic with kids here. And it's you're competing against Coke and Pepsi and Pizza Hut and these trillions of dollars of marketing budgets.
Right.
And there's a lot of misinformation out there. It's no different than the people who fight, global climate change or global warming with all kinds of misinformation. So I think when you're trying to make, part of it is you got to make wellness cool. The same way
Right.
people now see, the world changing around them. So there's a younger generation is waking up at a whole different level of like, we got to do something about this. I think there's a generation of kids that are waking up going like, I don't want to be 240 pounds like my parents.
I'm just going to do some conversions. I think 64 ounces is about 2 liters of Coca-Cola, and 240 pounds, I'm guessing, is like about 100 kilos. I think it's 2.2. So for anyone not in the US.
The average American, at least, eats, I think it's 100 times or 200 times the amount of sugar that they did 100 years ago. They used to eat it when it was in fruit, or maybe you had canned fruit twice in the winter or something. And it's like our bodies haven't changed, but we're on average eating 200 times the amount of sugar, and it's killing us.
Right. Phenomenal. What's curious about that for me, just to go down that rabbit hole a little bit, is a lot of the argument you would get from a food manufacturer is, well, we test this food and people say they want it. And I'm like, who are you testing it on? Because when someone hands me, a bread that is full of sugar and they've inserted sugar into it, or something that doesn't even need sugar, something like tomato sauce or something like that might need something mildly sweet to offset a flavor, but it doesn't need 20% sugar, which is what you typically find. Or mayonnaise, I think, has sugar in it too. Who's responding to the company saying, hey, yeah, we love it, please put more sugar in?
80% of foods that are made have sugar pumped into them now.
Right.
So if it's not in the States, you have your steak, your beef, your lamb, your eggs, your vegetables and fruit are around the edge and anything in the aisles in the middle. They're all like invented foods.
Right.
Well, to answer your other, like Pepsi got busted. I don't even know if they call it busted. They have scientists designed to make sugars more addictive to certain parts of your taste buds. So it's quite, they literally are making this stuff as addictive as possible.
Right.
And it's no different than the opiate crisis. They know full well what they're doing. Even look at that. Go look at it. There's that great thing too about the average size of the Coke bottle. Like in the 60s, it was 8 ounces. In the 70s, it was 12. In the 80s, it was 16. And then we went to sort of 24 and 32 ounce. Like they started upping the size of all those things. And you've seen this increasing obesity epidemic in the country.
Yeah. And look, that's actually probably a good segue in terms of like a big part of the role that the companies that you are involved in, or the founders you're involved in, are solving is to, as you said, make wellness cool. What role does policy change have to play in all of this as well?
I think it's huge. I mean, there's a client we have, Ojai Energetics, which is a really amazing company and amazing founder. He's kind of like the Elon Musk of the hemp plant, a guy named Will Clyden. And he's chairman of the California Hemp Council. So he's very involved in policy at the state level in California, where we sort of lead efforts across the country, but also at some of the national level. And I think, again, not demystifying, but weed was deemed evil as a racist thing against Mexicans. If you go back and look at the cartoons from the 20s, so that Pharma could get a toehold. You've seen this over and over where Pharma will demonize something or a segment of. So if you even look at sugar was about to get labeled for what it was, a highly addictive drug in the 70s by Harvard researchers. They very famously got paid off. Like they got busted for it much later. And they turned around and a couple months later came out and said fat's bad for you. And it started this whole Atkins diet nonsense and all these things that went on for like 30 to 40 years. And it's only people now understanding it's like, oh, the fat in avocados is actually healthy for me. And I actually so you get this stuff that takes on a life of its own and sort of seeps out into the culture. And then you've got to sort of beat it back. And that was literally the sugar industry paid off some Harvard researchers, and it's like killed untold millions of people from diabetes and stuff. It's crazy.
Yeah. And so in terms of the companies that you're working with, you just mentioned Ojai. By the way, that's like the OJAI, right? which just as an aside, I haven't actually been there, but I've met a couple of people from there. And it's interesting you say about escaping the hippie narrative. Ojai is like this wonderful kind of enclave. I wouldn't say it's hippie, but it is a wonderfully Californian place, if I can put it like that. Would that be a fair representation?
Yeah, for sure. Do you know Aldous Huxley, the writer, Brave New World?
Yeah.
So Aldous Huxley, who like hated Ford and hated Henry Ford and industrialization. So he's this English writer. He writes Brave New World about a dystopian future. He moves to Ojai late in his life and discovers psychedelics. He gets turned and he becomes a big proponent because psychedelics were getting mainstream positive press in the late 50s in the US.
Right.
It's a whole other rabbit hole I can go down. But
we're definitely going down there a bit.
His great last novel was called The Island or Island, and it's about a utopian future, and it's all these characters that he got out of Ojai. So, and Will, and the main character in the book is called Will, the protagonist, and Will is also the founder of Ojai Energetics. But he's got a mission to educate the world and mainstream the culture about all the positive things. The hemp plan is like people are only now barely beginning to know how powerful that plan is, and he's got a really strong strategy. I think it's much beyond what you would see on the website, and I think it's going to be a really important company.
Oh, we'll reach out to him in due course and have a chat. Just coming back to that, actually, in terms of the companies you work with, how does your model work in engaging them? I think it's not simply enough to just invest in these companies, which is, I think, part of it. But how are you engaging with these founders and these entrepreneurs and companies?
We don't ever write checks. We've got a ton of founders that are giving us equity because of that. What we've sort of we provide services. We provide incubator services for young founders that we really believe in. There's a carbon negative furniture company that we're in love with. There's an Ayurvedic food and supplement company that we're big believers in. So we'll take equity early stage, and it's kind of startup in a box with vetted partners and services with sort of deep domain expertise and wellness. And then as the company gets going, the fun and sexy part of this for us has been I've had founders that are close friends that 5-8 years ago I watched ideate their business, and now they're on their way to unicorn and unicorn plus status. And what before was sort of friends and family rounds, there's right now it's still on. There's a big family office conference in the fall in Asia that typically half of the world's well-to-do people go to, and we've got several of the speaking slots for that, and we're taking some of those founders there. So we're as these companies grow, it's almost like wellness is starting to be mainstreamed, and people are paying to it more and more as sort of a new vertical of unicorn potential investments. And where we step in, there's an accelerator division that'll have 90 to 150 companies in the portfolio in 5 to 6 years. But there's also, we do capital introductions for people. We've got a deep network of investors around the world looking for wellness deal flow that are starting to see us as spotting a lot of these companies early, working with a lot of these founders. And then after that, and people, again, early stage investments to now some Series B, but also we do a lot of D2C strategy, e-commerce strategy and implementation, and we do a lot of China market entry. We do things to drive revenue that make our founders raises. There's more of a likelihood of success and at higher valuations, and also create increased sort of exit opportunities by putting new markets like China.
Got it. And then just coming back a step on that, because I'm curious about the kind of the relationship to the founder. You made the comment before about there's a need to make this stuff cool, and I mean, maybe I'm too narrow in my view in terms of what I look at. I would say that there's certainly an emergence of a lot of this becoming cool, even getting sleep at night and having good work-life balance, and these kind of things are becoming, maybe they're not completely mainstream. I'm not sure if you find them in Tennessee. I'm not sure that's a fair question, but they are becoming cool. But part of what you're having to do is to perhaps identify the companies slash brands slash founders, whatever kind of the encapsulation is, that are or have the potential to be cool? Is that part of what you guys have to do?
I'm going to answer in two parts because I want to say one
Please.
thing before I forget it. On the sleep part of it,
Right.
tell all your readers to buy and read this book called Why We Sleep, Matthew Walker. Total freaking game changer. Whether you're an entrepreneur or a mom or you're raised like whatever, you got it. And you think it would be the driest book in the world, like Why We Sleep, but it's actually kind of a page turner. Maybe I'm a total nerd at heart, but that's my one plug on a book. Like
we'll put the link to that in the description.
So good. It's so good.
Yep.
I used to have a record label. So that was about like finding somebody in a basement playing for 30 people and figuring out how to, back in the old days, sell a couple million records.
Right.
And I think there are aspects of it that are similar, but I think it's more like the way I used to find a lead singer or a songwriting team and know where I could start to add value, and I just started doing it, and I really like I think part of what we're trying to build here is the culture we used to have at the record label Mammoth Records, which is like maybe more with a heart, but like get the fuck out of my way. I got stuff to take care of for my founder, for my client.
Right.
We want to build a reputation of like going the extra mile, being crazy creative, thinking outside the box, because we are sort of like mission, like that mission side of what we're doing is really important. And we think we found founders with big ideas and big dreams, and our job is to help them reach that full potential that they can have.
Got it. And so, like in practical terms, then, when a founder comes to you, what are you typically like? Are you trying to help them to understand how to take their thing to market? Are you telling them how to translate the vision that they have into the execution of a sales strategy or a marketing strategy? Like, where specifically in the business are you largely focused?
It's more case by case, because like different people, but it's no different than the lead singer of the band or sitting them down and having the talk of like, you gotta want to be a superstar as much as I want, or more than I want to make you a superstar, because it only works if you're in this thing to win it too. And it's kind of given. We used to say at the label that we'll take care of the business so that you can take care of the artistry and take care of the art and the music. And I kind of think it's not a perfect analogy, but there's a bit of that goes into this. And yeah, I think there's a bit of a roster mentality developing around some of the founders and the companies we have. It's like they go talk to other founders and they're like, "Oh, I want to be a part of this." Like, he was, but it is some of that. It's like, he connected that dot for her. Oh, he did that for them, and like he just did it because he cares about what she's doing. Like, there's a bit of that mentality, and I think that's the reputation we want to get.
And look, like it's funny. I spent only 5 years in San Francisco, and I think even we had a chat about this before the interview. But I had originally gone there thinking, this is all a meritocracy. But when I arrived on the ground, I made the connection pretty quickly that there is a lot of this is based on relationships and based on knowing who to connect with, who to lead to an outcome, or to put two or three people together to do something that otherwise they wouldn't do by themselves. Is a lot of this, knowing who to connect with and knowing who to put two people together and to produce amazing things as a result?
I think we were just having a conversation on it earlier today, and I think you just tapped into something. I think it's two sides to that. I think we are, because we're so passionate about wellness and because we've got this global approach to it, I feel like we're getting the deepest connections in wellness with domain expertise in wellness in the world. So it's like, you need capital, you need these two things to drive revenue. You want to crack the biggest market in the world, China. Here's a roadmap to do it. Here's people we can introduce. And every time we go through that process, you get deeper into it. So you're almost like creating a system that you can do it on. It's no different than when I used to put out 2 records a year and then 4 records and then 8 and then 15. And it's like, you get better at it each time. You learn how to take it a little further each time. And I think that's kind of what we're doing. And it's, the first time you take a brand into China, doesn't happen overnight. Like, you go down some roads and they end up being dead ends and you got to back up and you're figuring out. And like the 6th time you're doing it, it's like, okay, we don't want to go there, but we want to do this. And I'm going to have you meet these 3 people. And it's like everything starts to pick up steam and pick up momentum. And the deeper those grooves get, the there's like more and more trust among all the partners. A lot of what we're doing is building ecosystem that can support each other. And it is that concept of like vetted partners. Like I've got,
Right.
there was a company, we did a deal with Live Nation, the world's largest ticketing company for last year. And they're amazing. She's actually Australian, the founder. And we were talking about somebody that I was having problems with, who it turns out acts like she operates on a higher vibration, and it turns out she's quite the opposite and has that reputation. And I hadn't been aware. And she's like, I forget what she said the phrase was, but they had a funny name for him at their company, and it was like a list of people that none of their employees were allowed to do business with because of all the problems.
Yeah, right.
And it's like, to be able to, if you're a founder though, and you can come in and we can guide you on that, of like, hey, you may not want to use that attorney, you may want to pick from these 5. Like they're all cheap, they're all good for founders, they understand entrepreneurs, they're not just about the build, whatever the thing is, they can still go make their own choice. But there is that vetted partner concept, I think is invaluable, both in saving wasted money, saving time, etc. for a founder, whether they're in startup mode or whether they're at 50 million a year of revenue.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, I mean, I think as well as that, you touched on this idea that those partners will often, will go on your reputation. If you have a track record of saying, I've got great artists, to use that analogy, people who are doing the work, it could be a marketing thing or a law thing or a distribution thing, are going to think, well, Jay and the Wellness Agency reliably bring me people who I can work with, who are doing great things, and my role is to elevate that or amplify that or whatever that is.
I always we were talking about John O'Malley's this great guy in San Francisco who's our capital introductions head, and we were talking about, because he came from the music industry too, and it's like I always think about like Gary Gersh, that he's now head of AEG Live, great guy, old friend. And he was the guy back in the day who signed Sonic Youth. And Sonic Youth at the time was like the coolest band ever. And they never sold more than 100,000 records. But the only reason Nirvana signed with Gary Gersh at Geffen was because he'd signed Sonic Youth and he'd taken care of him and he'd done right by him. And then Nirvana comes in and sells 200 times that. They sell 20 million copies. They would have never signed without it. So it is those foundational, and then because Nirvana signed there, as alternative exploded in the mainstream, every alternative band that also wanted to sell units, what's the first door you go knock on? It was Gary Gersh's.
Absolutely.
And it's Kurt would swear by what Gary did for them and protecting their vision and supporting their vision, and I think that's what we're trying to do.
That's a fascinating analogy. It's funny. Like I was at high school in the early 90s, right, when all that blew up, and I got my head around Nirvana, but I could never understand the fascination that some of the cooler kids had with Sonic Youth, and I'm like, I just don't get it. I never fully. That's actually connected a few dots for me personally, so I appreciate that. Let's go down that rabbit hole a bit. Like you're in wellness now, and you've been there for a little while, but obviously rooted in the artistry. How did you even arrive at this point working in this space? Let's go back a bit.
It really began with that journey with the doctor just giving me really bad advice, and I sat down with him and said, what do I do about my pulled calf muscle? And he didn't say, are you hydrated, are you stretching, are you stressed, are you drinking too much booze, too much sugar? And I go, what do I do? And he goes, I guess you got to stop running. And I knew F all about wellness. I stood up, laughed in the dude's face, and walked out the door.
15 years ago, right?
Yes, 15 years ago, and it began 17. I began that journey, and then my father's decline, which was like 6 years ago or so, and he's going to Mayo. He's going to these places that are supposed to be the best hospitals in the world, and he's getting like none of the doctors are communicating with each other, like ridiculous. And I was like, if he can't get good intel, and I could, like, what's it like for the average person? And as I started getting more and more into wellness, you realize like the need for it, and like the deeper you go into this stuff, kind of the scarier it gets. But I love that opiate example because it's very real, it's very true. It shows the brokenness of both pharma and Western med, that they could push that for so long with a straight face. And I look at the Pepsis and the Cokes of the world too, which have created a massive diabetes epidemic. And pharma's over here going like, okay, you've got diabetes, you've got to be on this medicine the rest of your life, not stop drinking Coke and Pepsi and start exercising and drink water and eat, and it'll go
Right. But
away. Like,
that's so I've certainly got the motivation. But how? I mean, 17 years ago, you were in the thick of being in, artist, and what's the AR stand for again in the artist and recording?
yeah, I was at Lionsgate running music by them, but it was
Yeah, like how did you go? Oh, you know what? I'm going to put all of those tools down, and I'm going to go over here.
a decade ago. I started making some small investments in this space and using it as a tool to get in deeper, and went on the boards of some companies and advised some. But I stopped writing checks, and I was doing some other stuff. Probably 2 years ago, started focusing on wellness full
Right.
time. Just realized how important the space was and how much work there was to be done, and it was it was at this time that I was starting to see the potential. I really do like that analogy, and I believe it's a very accurate one. What Silicon Valley was to the tech world 25 to 35 years ago, I think Venice is becoming to
Right.
wellness. And you look at Jonathan Neiman's and what a great job he and his partners have done with Sweet Greens, where they've now raised at $1 billion valuation. And to simplify it horribly, he wants to be like a healthy version of McDonald's, and he definitely has major aspirations. And if you look at our cats and seed probiotics, like it's going to be a multi-unicorn. It's a really important company and centered around gut health and the gut biome. And so we want to be deep in science with our founders. We want to not in the woo-woo end of it. I mean, I think there's a place for spirituality and the,
Hold on, we just have to come back to that term. I know what the woo-woo is, but just explain that to people.
it's where it gets too new
Right.
agey and it's not based on
Right.
science. And I think it's great to have a spiritual foundation. I think it's important. Emotional health and spiritual health are very important. But I think when you're talking about, I think you can separate those two, and you can have spiritual and emotional health. And I look at certain companies, and they're too woo woo. There's no science. You if you go dive deep on seed
Right.
health, which everybody should know about that company, grounded in deep
Right.
science, and she's smart with her branding, and she's genius with her marketing. But underneath it all, it's a really important company doing really important
Right.
work.
Absolutely. And so sorry, I did cut you off from the AR thing. So you come across some records, you've started investing in some of these companies.
Well, it was just sort of this. It was like a slippery slope.
It wasn't a moment where you're like,
Uh,
actually, now I'm doing this full time. You're like, you suddenly woke up and went, hold on, I'm in the wellness industry.
That's kind of what it was. Like I saw it. There were things happening. I started to see where it was going to go. Part of it too was 4 or 5 years ago, I started doing this China thing, and at first, I fell in love with the food and the people and the history and the culture. And I'm probably in a non-COVID world, I go there 5
Right.
times a year on average. So, and it's like, and then the more I got into it, like I was there. I landed. I got to Beijing the night before the last 5-year party
Right.
Congress opened, like 2 years ago now in November. And I wake up and my friends in the State Department are like the city's on lockdown. Why the heck are you here? And it seemed fine to me. But like the takeaway I had from that is President Xi that year, 2 years ago, gave a white paper on the importance of wellness to 7,500 party Congress members. And it was, really the simplified version was for the health and happiness of our people, for increased worker productivity, and for decreased healthcare costs. And it's like, could you ever imagine President Trump doing that for our Congress? And you've got 500 million millennial kids there obsessed with for all the nonsense that goes across back and forth on trade at the top. Millennial kids in China are obsessed with Western brands. They're obsessed with wellness. And I remember the first time I go down, this is 4 or 5 years ago now, I'm going down this side street to my hotel in Beijing, first trip. And on this one road, there's like a high-end yoga studio, a juice shop, a vegan restaurant, and around the corner is CrossFit. And I'm like, holy shit. And so it was more just, I don't know, like some of it's luck and some of it's like maybe there was some grand design I didn't know about, but like I'm having a blast.
I guess part of that question is I think a lot of what I ran a meetup in San Francisco for financial services for fintech, and a lot of the people who came attended because they were sort of sitting inside the establishment, being a traditional bank or a wealth brokerage or whatever, and trying to work out how to be involved in something for them more meaningful in this case, getting involved in reinventing financial services. And a lot of them are trying to think, what's the pathway? And I think there's a disposition to think, okay, I have to find a moment and I have to suddenly make a change. But your evolution here sort of challenges that and says, actually, no, just start getting more involved, start working with these companies or buying their stuff or investing in them if that's your thing, or, you know, doing some pro bono work or whatever that thing is. And you can slowly move into something that floats your boat a bit more by the sound of it.
I don't ever use that word, like, and we've now got a real funnel where like companies find me every week, and that's not a lot. And some of them are really far along, and some of them are, you know, an idea in somebody's head. But I'm a big believer in, like, if you think a lead singer, if you think a guitarist, if you think a founder's got talent, start helping them, and like you'll figure out if the person's got a good head on their shoulders, if they're really driven, like you and just start adding some value, and you can figure out what the, like, if one founder fucks you over, and excuse my French, and is short-sighted, you don't even really need to. You just sort of be like, okay, that person showed their colors. I'm gonna line up behind them. You only there's a great booking agent I know in the music world, and he's like, I don't sign bands to long-term contracts. Like, if they don't want to be with me, I don't want to work for. Like, there's way more bands there's way more great artists than there are great booking agents. And that's kind of like, we're building a system that's going to be really valuable. And if a founder is so short-sighted, usually it's other stressors, then you know, we wish them all, they can go on.
Yeah, power to them. We'll see you out there. It's interesting. I think a couple of my mantras there is, if you want to know what it's like to work with someone, just start working with them. Like, there's literally no other way to know that. And I think in doing that, one of my other mantras is, everyone's good when they're good. It's not until you see challenge and adversity that you actually get to see people's true character. And so you sort of have to dig for that moment and sort of wait for that moment to really understand what it's going to be like working with this person. Because when the sun's shining.
One of my mentors, and like Erin, who's kind of my, she's our D2C head, and she's young, but she's really good and really driven and committed. And she's been through the early stages of the company. And I love seeing people grow, but it's also, there's the story I started to tell. There's a mentor of mine, Harold Ludwig. He used to be chairman of the board of Lionsgate and just kind of an epic dude. And he's like, you're always going to get in battle. And it's like, you want to be in a foxhole with somebody who's like getting out of the foxhole with you, not somebody who's turning on you in the foxhole. And I, you know, if you're an entrepreneur long enough, you have those cases, and you just hope your instincts get a little better. But I think that's where, you know, to Mel's list about, here's the 11 people we never do business with, and if you need to know, I will pull you aside and tell you, or what we think we're doing with some vetted, you know, here's a really reputable D2C firm, here's a really great social media firm. You know, if you want to use them, great. If you don't, here's three others we'll recommend, and have sort of vetted partners that have good reputations. I think it's invaluable to a founder.
And I'm going to do a massive kind of segue from this, and I don't know how I'm going to make this leap, but before the interview, we said we would talk about psychedelics. I'm interested to talk about them. I've just finished reading Michael Pollan's book, Change Your Mind, like literally last night. Let's go in there. Where do these factor into your thinking about this space, or just more broadly?
Several points, and I'm glad you brought it up. But no, it totally segues. I meant to bring it up early.
I think you did, actually.
One of the things that excites me the most about wellness, and I mean, like, I almost get goosebumps talking about it. It's like rap becoming a new form of music, or EDM becoming, like, what's the next that like reinvents it. And CBD exists. Everybody knew what CBD was 2 years ago. Nobody knew how big it was going to be. It's like, if you look at Ojai Energetics and what they're going to do, it did, you know, the CBD world did $1 billion of business last year, and there's still a lot of garbage that needs to get pulled off the shelves, and so that the higher quality players win.
So just explain to everyone what CBD is, just for people who may not know.
Yeah, CBD is the non-THC, that's piece of the hemp plant without THC in it, that has a lot of benefits around. The simplified version was it'd be anti-inflammatory, but there's uses in science way beyond that. That business is going to go from $1 billion to $20 billion in the next 5 years to $50 billion in 10 years. it's squarely in wellness. And now you're seeing things like psychedelics. So psychedelics, if you go back, you've read the book, so you know this. In the 50s, Henry Luce Booth, I think his name was, owned Time Life magazine. He was writing positive articles about the benefits of LSD, and with a guide, with a practitioner who knew what they were doing. Setting is everything. Don't do it in a noisy club.
Do it in a
It's
white
not where
room.
you stop. Yeah, do it with intention, do it with a proper guide. But they're learning. We work really closely with some of the leaders in this space, and it's LSD, mushrooms, psilocybin, and there's several other plant-based medicines that are getting much better results for PTSD, for trauma, for alcoholism, for addiction, than these, again, a lot of times than the pharma players. And pharma doesn't really like it because they want you to be on your opiate or your whatever for the next 12 years. And sometimes you can get cured with one session. There's a fund we're getting involved with in the space that we think has eyes on the best companies in the space. We know some of the individual companies. We're nurturing some of the companies. There's a great doctor that we love who's worked with a lot of the veterans, who has a big mission to get every veteran in the States off of opiates in the next decade. And it's an insane mission, but he's getting phenomenal results using some of these tools. So psychedelic, it's going to become big business, but there's a lot of real value and need for it. And again, it's, our goal is to help some of these founders succeed, and it's to help to mainstream some of these concepts.
Yeah, and look, it's like you made a point before about the wow, I think it was. Look, the thing that I think a lot of people misunderstand, and this is again the parallels to sugar and the parallels to what the auto industry did, and with regards to walking and the like, I think is the story in LA. There's a lot of misinformation on the science of psychedelics, and we could be here for another 40 minutes, so we probably won't dive in too deep, but ultimately your attitude to wellness is, if this stuff is rooted in science and there's a credibility to what their understanding is, and they have results that can be verified and replicated, then you have to look at this stuff, and there might be challenges which are either industry or policy based or just even public perception, and great, they're the challenges. You need to change those things. No one in the 60s or the 70s loved the kind of music that Nirvana came up with, and there was a whole movement that happened when you changed people's perception and people gravitated towards something. I wouldn't say it was necessarily about making it cool, but perhaps making it mainstream. It sounds like this sits squarely in that mode of thinking for you guys.
Look, if we can get people off of opiates and getting more in touch with their emotional side or their spiritual, and I think a lot of times people are more spiritually connected when they do some of this plant-based journey, plant-based work is what I would call it. But you've got there are friends of ours they have a commercialization effort with all the science that Oxford University in England is doing around psychedelics. Like this stuff, it's just not quacky stuff. And then you got to realize, like you having just read that book, Johns Hopkins University is doing some of the leading research now on psychedelics in the U.S. It's a great university. They were the ones in the 50s and 60s doing the same thing. And then Timothy Leary comes in and does tune in, drop out. We were going to war in Vietnam. They couldn't have kids going to the draft saying drop out. So the government went from embracing and studying psychedelics for all the beneficial properties to demonizing it. Like a new government came in and demonized it and destroyed a lot of the research.
Yeah.
So it's a fascinating history of where we were 60, 70 years ago on it, and what we're coming back to.
Finally coming out of the other side of it. Yeah, it's amazing. Like, I'll put links to that into the description. The link to that book is well worth a read.
You may want to put that fortune, like if you're into the psychedelic stuff, there's a microdose. I'll try and find you the link. It was a microdose conference that was really cool that our friends did, and then that Fortune magazine cover that Tim Ferriss is on about psychedelics, and they've used him sort of as a face of it because he's been investing pretty heavily in the space.
Yeah, he's been a proponent for a while, from my understanding. Yeah, absolutely. The more links, the merrier. Just sort of coming up a step as well, because there's a lot that you talked about the 7 themes earlier on, in terms of the focus for the wellness agency. So you've got plenty to think about, but in there's a lot to do. What are your kind of go-tos and your inspirations, the things that keep you centered and focused in either the work that other people are doing or your daily routines and mantras that really sort of help you to stay true and focus on true north?
I'm really boring now. I get a good night's sleep, read the book Why We Sleep. I eat pretty clean, mostly whole foods. I don't think I
Right.
have any junk in the house, and try and have as little sugar as possible. Don't really drink booze.
Right.
I drink 64 ounces of water every day. I have 2 green teas every day. I meditate every day. I study every day. I think like committing oneself to sort of a lifetime of learning is like so exciting. Whether that's
Totally.
cooking for you or reading books or learning whatever. And I try and exercise every day.
Yeah, I was actually going to ask you back running.
Don't run just because of my knees. And actually, it's not true. Like during COVID, I started doing these uphill sprints just to like blast my heart rate, and have been having fun doing that. But mine's usually like Muay Thai, yoga, weights, and then I'll probably start getting back on. I suck at surfing, but I have fun. I'm embarrassingly bad, but I still get enormous joy out of it. So
I think that's the whole point of surfing.
It's only a problem when you have friends who are like legendary surfers, and it's like
sounds like a humble brag to me, Jay.
No,
like my best friends are
like
surfers.
it's genuine embarrassment to get in the water with them.
I love it.
So, and then ask the question again. There was another part to it.
Just how do you stay centered? Like what? Like everyone has a bad day at the office, despite all the sleep and all the the great food and everything, the exercise and the meditation. Eventually, life gets in the way when that happens.
I probably realize when it's out of kilter and step back and give time to yourself. And
Right.
I'm older, but I feel like I act like I'm 27, and I feel like I'm 32. And it's, I do drink.
Perfect.
I do less drugs. I do get more sleep. There's that great thing about like most entrepreneurs. Like if you're a real entrepreneur, you'll be up at 6 a.m. and you'll work till 4 a.m. and blah, blah.
Right.
And it's like, Why We Sleep, and he documents all the signs. And it's like, actually, your creativity is way lessened, your quality, your decision making. So I think I've learned to internalize a lot of that stuff. And the more I do those sort of 9 things that I just mentioned, the better off I feel, and probably the more productive my day is. And the other side of it is like, I crazy love what I do, and to be able to work with these founders that I think are transformational founders that are creating really important companies is just like really exciting. So it's kind of like when I had the record label, and it's like, okay, so on my worst day, I got to go to a club tonight and watch a band and drink a beer or two,
and hang out with incredibly amazing people doing amazingly, interesting or creative things.
I was always fascinated by artists who like, what is in you that you were able to write that? Like, I couldn't write a song if my life depended on it.
Totally.
And that was kind of like, I had such enormous respect for that, and I think maybe there's a similar thing where I just have so much respect for what these founders are doing. And if I can help them, again, sort of bring their visions to a full scale and to the full world, it's a high for us, and it's a high for the team we've got.
Oh, it's amazing. Like it's lovely to be part of something, and probably as a final segue, I'm stoked to have had you to be part of this for a brief moment.
Thank you. Thanks awesome. For having me.
Yeah, and like there's definitely there's going to be a bunch of links in this because there was so much. I felt like we had book club in there, a bunch of other interesting entrepreneurs, maybe some that we can talk to at some point as well. But Jay, thank you so much for joining us on Shape the System today.
Happy to introduce you to any of those guys, and if there are any of the book links then I need to follow up on, like, happy to give resources there.
It's going to be awesome.
Thanks.
Thank you so much.
See you, man.
Have a great
enjoy your weekend. Day. Take care.
Yes. Bye-bye.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of Shape the System. As usual, if you'd like to suggest a guest, someone that you know who's helped change a system for the better, please go to www.shapethesystem.org, click on the top right-hand corner, then click Suggest Guest. Make sure that you click subscribe so that you get the new episode. Shape the System is an independent podcast with support from KPMG High Growth Ventures. Connects founders to the services they need along their journey. Whether you are looking to refine your strategy, mature your finance function, prepare for a capital raise, expand abroad, or simply comply with regulatory requirements, they provide you with the support you need to drive your business forward.